Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Jaya Girivardhari
Jaya Gopijana Vallabha
Jaya Yashodanandana Jaya Durjanarandana Jaya Yamunatiravanachari Jaya Kunjavihari
Jaya Yamunatiravanachari Jaya Kunjavihari
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Devi Prabhani Prajani Devi Sri Krishna Bhakti Pashchaya Vishatani Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Because parenting is actually a very good platform to become Krishna conscious. It's a wonderful opportunity to develop good qualities, because parenting actually means being guru. This is the first principle of guru. Actually the mother is the first guru to the child. And then the second is the father, and third is the teacher. So it's something we don't really think so much about, but when you see and when you understand this principle that parents are gurus also to the children, then it brings education and training to a whole other level. So I'd like to share with you first some basic principles in raising children. I mean, the first one is really that the goal is not different from what one is trying to do with one's own life to become Krishna conscious. So this is our own goal as an individual in Krishna consciousness, is to develop that consciousness of Krishna. And if we want as parents and as teachers, if we want, or when we have dependents who are, dependent on us for so many different things in life, we have to become Krishna conscious ourselves first. So that's why actually parenting is a very good position, because in order to give to others, you have to give it to yourself first. You cannot give what you don't have. So that's why it's a deep work on yourself, first as an individual. When you work on yourself as an individual, and when you give yourself the time to develop good qualities, proper character, and a good consciousness where we can actually think about Krishna. When we have these things, then we'll be able to influence others, especially our children, to do it also. So, as a basic principle, we can see that human life is meant to elevate ourselves. So this is the difference between human and animals. So again, like, if we want to elevate our children, we have to elevate ourselves first. To really charity starts at home. And in studying about this parenting, I realized actually how great a responsibility it is to raise children, especially to raise them in Krishna consciousness. There's the foundation where we have to give them social skills, we have to give them human values by which they can work nicely in society, but plus that we have to give them Krishna consciousness also. We could say Krishna consciousness is the greatest value as parents we can give to the child, because this is the true need of the individual, to be Krishna conscious. But besides that, we also have to see how we can help them to develop social skills by which they can become responsible human beings. So apple doesn't fall far from the tree. What we are looking in children is ourselves. So it's quite interesting, because just like you invest in cooking, if you invest only 2 minutes in cooking, how much result would you have? No? It's the same thing with children. If we don't want to spend the time to invest ourselves in training them and educating them in human life in Krishna consciousness, then what will be the result at the end? So it's a serious investment, and actually, myself as a brahmachari, I truly respect grihasthas who take that time and that investment as a lifelong commitment, actually, to raise their children in Krishna consciousness. So it's quite a responsibility, and I truly respect that. So. And because it is a great responsibility, we have to take the proper time and the proper investment to actually really first work on ourselves as individuals, and then work on our children, help them to actually give them the facility to grow nicely as a human and in Krishna consciousness. So when I realize the value of what I heard by practice, then I can teach it to others. So, if you see the parent as a guru, before we become guru, then we have to be student. So we're all trying to learn, principles of life. And it's the same thing like, a student at school is, when we want to understand proper human values, what is the role of a parent, and how to actually give proper knowledge and education to the child. Then first we have to study it ourselves, and then by practicing it, then we'll get the realization about it. And when we realize it, then we'll want to teach it to others. So if you help an individual starting with yourself, you can help other individuals. I'm repeating this, but this is really kind of the main foundational principle, is to really, really work on ourselves and give ourselves the proper time to grow nicely as human beings and in Krishna consciousness. And in that way, we'll be able to inspire the child to also get into that direction. If we see parenting, we may think that, there are different techniques that we can use, to teach our children. But actually, it's not really about technique. Technique is more like, it's useful, and we can use techniques, but it's more secondary. Really, like what's primary in parenting is to have proper character, proper mentality. You need to be Krishna conscious. Because if you have all the good techniques of the world, and you've studied so many books about parenting, but you're not yourself a good human being and not Krishna conscious, then what will be the value, of your teaching your children? So if we see it's the same thing with leadership. Leadership means you're convinced, you practice it, and you do it. Parenting is just the same way. So what effort you put in, that's what you get back. So there's such, like I was saying, it's such a great responsibility. And such a great investment that we have to do toward our children, such a great gift, that we can give them, spending the valuable time to actually train them, in their life. But we cannot complain if after many years we see that the child is not growing nicely, if we ourselves have not made the proper investment towards them, proper service to really be present to their questions, present to their needs, and present to what they need to have to actually grow soundly and to be stable human beings. So that's why there must be that attention, that focus. And it takes time, and it's not just a one-way, technique. Because every child is an individual, we cannot just use one technique and think that it's going to work for every child. So we have to take into account the individuality of the child, the personality, the nature of the child, the conditioning of the child. And understanding that, then we have to see what proper technique works. And we have to try so many different angles. We have to try so many different angles sometimes to kind of have proper results with the child. I'll give you an example. There was one child in a Gurukul in Mayapur. He didn't see the value in sweeping the floor. Because at a Gurukul, they're taught at a young age to develop the mood of service, to sweep the floor, to clean the ashram, to help them develop these qualities of humility and tolerance. And the child, he didn't understand at all, why should I sweep the floor? So it took 45 minutes every day of explanation, 45 minutes every day for 6 weeks. And after 6 weeks of explanation, the same thing, then the child was able to understand. So it's just an example to show you that we have to be very patient, very patient. Like I was saying, it's a lifelong commitment. And sometimes, we try from different angles to teach the children into proper character, proper behavior. But we find that that's not always the best results. So that's why we have to keep doing it and patiently trying from different ways to try to inspire them to change their behavior. But sometimes it can even take years depending on the nature of the individual. So that's why parenting is a very good platform to become a good servant and develop qualities like humility, tolerance, patience, and respect. So practice without contemplation, intelligence, doesn't give you the same effect, depth. So as parents, there's this emotional attachment towards the child. But we cannot base our parenting only on the emotional attachment. We need to use the intelligence to actually see in our intervention with the children how we can apply properly our knowledge and properly our parenting towards them in a way that will be efficient. So that there needs to be a constant use of the intelligence to always go beyond the emotion that we have as a connection to the parent and the child and see how we can, according to time, place, and circumstance, work effectively with the child. This is a very important principle. So parent feels the oneness with the child. Child feels the difference. He doesn't know what you think. It's quite interesting. So there's just from the side of the child, because the parent is so united with the child, especially the mother, there's just this natural oneness. But the child sees the difference because, from the side of the child is the dependence, so he's depending on the parents. So there's just this kind of different mentality with the child and with the parents. And we can see it just like Krsna. Krsna is non-different from his creation, but the individuals in it they see the difference. So it's important for the parent to see that the child will not necessarily understand right away what the parent thinks and what the parent feels and what the parent thinks is best for the child. So that's why we need to find the proper time to explain all these things. So if I put 5 minutes work, do I get unlimited profits for the rest of my life? No, we need to have a constant endeavor. And it's not something that you do for a few years, it's a lifetime commitment, like I was saying. We help them throughout their development, As a child, as a youth, as a teenager, as a young adult, even as an older adult, you help them to go to these different stages. So it's truly a lifelong commitment, and that's why I truly respect that. So you can't take for granted that the child understands everything right away. Because, the child goes through different stages of life, and they need time to experience these things and really understand these principles. So that's why we need to be patient with them and keep explaining in different ways. So another principle, parent is in the masculine position, child is in the feminine. Feminine meaning dependent. So because the child is dependent, it shows you how great the responsibility of the parent is. The child is dependent toward all his needs and all his different like physical needs, emotional needs, intellectual needs. So the parent needs to be there and provide that facility and that environment for the children. So it's the parent's business to figure out what the child is thinking, not vice versa. We cannot expect, like I was saying earlier, that they will understand what we mean and how much we try to help them. Like they're not necessarily grateful right away. And that's why parenting is a very good platform to learn humility and tolerance, because we give so much to the children, but it may take many years before they actually appreciate all the effort that you put toward them. So in that sense, it's very good. So the child is an individual, so he has to be dealt with individually. He is not you. Sometimes because the parent feels the oneness with the child, we think that this is my child. The child is like me. But we really have to take into account that, yes, that child comes into my family, we're related by blood, but that soul is coming from another past life with a previous conditioning and nature, and so we have to understand this and see how we cannot deal exactly like we deal with ourselves. In a sense, we have to see the individuality of the child. Because Krishna consciousness is about being personal. So drive to care is the natural attachment, but that attachment should be used in the Lord's service. So as parents, definitely we have a strong emotional attachment towards the child, because like I was saying, I'm the parent, this is my child. But that attachment that we have in the relationship with the children should see how we can connect that to Krishna. Do it as a service for them. And there's a good example of this is that if you just think about it for a sec, where is the childness in the child coming from? Where is the cuteness in the child coming from? Where is the naughtiness in the child? If we see that everything is coming from Krishna, then we can appreciate that all of these are coming from baby Krishna. Krishna is the original child. So if we treat our child and appreciate the principle of Krishna as the cuteness, as the childness, as the innocence, and as a parent, if you just think, how will I serve Krishna as a child? If Krishna will be my child, how will I serve him? How will I care for him? How will I teach him? So that same principle we can apply to their children, and this is Krishna consciousness. So it's a very beautiful principle, is that actually what is described in the scriptures is that if you take care of your child like you will take care of Krishna, and you have that consciousness that Krishna is present as the childness, then with that consciousness, it's just like Mother Yashoda serving Krishna, the same benefit is there. So just being attached to the child doesn't mean you know what you're doing. That's why we need to apply the intelligence. The emotion is not enough. The emotion is what drives us to care and love for the child. But in order to have a proper and efficient intervention, we always need to use the intelligence. And intelligent means using scriptures, because like the Vedic knowledge and Vedic culture also understands what is the dharma of a parent, what is the dharma of the mother, what is the dharma of the child, what is the dharma of the father. And understanding this inherent nature of the parents and the child, then using these principles, we can apply them, to our children. So if you like eating, doesn't mean you know how to cook. So we may like to be parents, and we may like our children, but again, just I push that principle, we need to understand the dharma, behind those things, these positions, these roles, and which values to have, which qualities to have as parents, and how to deal with the child properly. So you have to find what kind of effort works on the child. And that's what takes time, and that's what takes also intelligence, to constantly meditate on how can I be more effective in dealing with my children. What do they need as individuals? What technique or what angle of intervention can I use in a way that they will be able to respond? And we all constantly need to adjust with these things so that we can act properly. So we should teach children in the aspect of how to find knowledge and how to value it. Very important, because you see, like when the children are 3-4 years old, they're so inquisitive. And if we don't answer their questions, if we don't find the time to answer all their questions, then this mood of inquisitiveness will be kind of like diminished. And after that, they won't see any value in acquiring knowledge. So it's really important to really constantly answer their questions. And tell them if we don't have the question, let them know that we'll look for it somewhere else. And let them know also how they can get knowledge to their questions. To give them appreciation of scriptures, showing them that the scriptural authority is the best place to understand life, in the different aspects. So in parental wrath, it's pretty much a one-way street. You're putting in the energy, but they may or may not respond. And that's why it's such a glorious service. That's where it's such a good opportunity to grow as individuals. Mother Yashoda, she is the original mother, so by her behavior and her qualities, we can appreciate the qualities of a parent. When there is a similarity of view and the mentality, you can be more strict, like father with boy, or mother with the girl. Because there's similar nature between, like the man and the boy. So in that, there can be more like a personal intervention. So that's why traditionally, like in the Gurukul, the young boys, they need to have the presence of the mother because, like I was saying, it's the first guru, and she really gives the proper care and affection to make the child be a strong individual and confident with good self-esteem. But after 5 years old, like for the boys, they need to be in the association of men to actually build the mentality of the man and understand what is the dharma of a man. So there should be common standards between mother, father, and teacher. Principle is complete with these three. And that's what is really missing in society. And it's difficult to give to our children because as parents we can give them Krishna consciousness and we can give them a system of values by which they can have a solid foundation in their life. But the thing is that they go to schools where the teachers don't exactly have the same value system, don't exactly have the same mentality about God, same mentality about self-control, about being more like in the mood of a servant. So that's where we see that it doesn't, for the child, it becomes a little confusing when they go to these schools and they go and they meet other children with other value system and other mentalities, and with teachers who have other values also, teaching more like, even more like now based toward atheism, sense enjoyment, and being attached to the bodily concept of life, these different things. So that's why this is, if we can as much as possible try to bring these three at the same level, then this is what is ideal for the children. Does parents choose a teacher with similar values? Liberal parents send their kids to a liberal school, and conservative ones to conservative schools. So just naturally which kind of education we want to give to our children, we'll provide that for them, as much as is possible. So why I'm sharing this point is just to show the importance as parents, we should try to create more facility for the children to have teachers from a young age, not only parents, but teachers that will give them proper education, not only at the material level, but at the spiritual level. Because we see that, the child goes to school from 5 years old to 25 years old. And when they go to schools, they won't need about character training. They won't learn about human qualities so much. And they won't learn about Krishna consciousness. So because that will be absent in their education, as parents, it gives us extra responsibility to really make sure somehow or other that they can have that facility, that training and education to be able to develop these human qualities and spiritual values. So the parents need to be able to communicate and have common grounds, similar mood if they want to be successful in raising the child based on commonality. Because the child really is very sensitive, actually even at a very young age, just like the animal. Like the cat in the family, like the cat in the house will be able to sense the mood in the family, what's happening. It's the same thing with the baby. Even a young child will be able to understand the mood, to feel the mood. He might not understand the words, but he will be able to understand the mood. So that's why when there's commonality in mentality, commonality in standards of living, commonality in Krishna consciousness, when the kid sees that, then it will make him very strong and balanced. But if he sees differences, so many differences between the parents, that might be confusing for the child, and it can create some kind of a conflicting nature in the mood of the child. It's the same thing also, like I was saying, with the teacher. He goes to school and then he learns different values with the children, and then there's some confusion there. In a conflict, don't get the child to take sides. They won't. They will take their friend's side. Friends are just friends, no politics. They're individuals, not paraphernalia. So when there are conflicts, and it's just, not paraphernalia is an interesting concept. In psychology, they say that what is explained is that sometimes the parents, they can see the kids as objects of their sense enjoyment. And it is a very subtle thing, actually. It's just like a paraphernalia, like the children are revolving around their sense enjoyment. And if we stay only on that platform, then we don't care for the child so much as an individual. We care for the child for our own enjoyment. And that's what we see is happening actually in modern families, you know, in modern values. So we really have to see how as parents, we're there for the kids. And that's the first principle of relationship. Relationship means it's all about the other person. That's why we get it all wrong in our society. Our relationships are not so satisfying because we think it is about me. But relationship is completely about the other person. Especially as parents, it's completely about my child. So partner is defined by similar nature, main aspect. If your relationship is balanced, the child will be balanced too. Because the first 5 years in the life of a child is foundational for their character and how they will grow for the rest of their life. So that's why we have to invest a really solid family atmosphere, very solid relationship with the child, and solid environment so that they can feel safe, confident, and they can feel balanced, you know, in that environment. So if the parents have different natures, the child will receive both of the natures. Difficult to figure out who the child is. I do something because I know who I am. So again, it's really important as a family to see how we can have common standards, common values, you know, common mentalities. So again, Krishna's family, the best way to see, you know, how these parental principles work. Because, you know, the Mother Yashoda and Nanda Maharaj, they are the original parents, you know, of God. So by seeing how they act with Krishna, we can learn quite a lot, actually. If the parents are comfortable with themselves and each other, communication, companionship, then the child will also be comfortable in that environment, identity. So it's really all about the mood that is there, you know, which mood you create. Because the child, even at 1 year old, really picks the mood right away. The quality of the relationship will affect the quality of the child's nature. So if the child sees in the family that there are strong relationships based on trust, love, and confidence, then that will be his foundation for the rest of his life. But if he sees that parents are not taking care of each other, not taking care of the child, then the child necessarily won't want to take care of others for the rest of his life. So it really shows you how the mentality starts at a young age. You can define the nature of the child by the family in which he is born and the association he has from the family members over time. Quite interesting. If the child doesn't feel stability with the parents, he will find another place, meaning his friends at school. Starting from 11, it starts to switch from the parents to the peers. At 13, it's very solid. So if the child doesn't have that solid value system, how to act as a human being, then naturally he will want, when he's looking for his individuality, when he's like 13 years old, at teenage life, he will want to look for a standard of life by himself or herself. So that's why we really have to make sure that they have that since the beginning. Because then even if they go to school and they see other value system, they will be able to compare with what they're experiencing in their family and see what's best. They will see better results in themselves. If you don't teach them values, they will start to look for their own values. If you let them do whatever they like, don't complain when they do things you don't like. Naturally. If there is no foundation, no standards, then yeah, we spoke about that. Parents have free will. They get married and may get divorced. What about the child? It's not a matter of choice for him. It takes sense control, training, and character for the parents. So that's why, like I was saying, if you see the child as an object, then when the parents want to divorce, they won't see how much the need of a child is the priority, in the family. Because parents are in the masculine position. Masculine means they provide and give shelter to the child. So this has to be the priority, and see, even though there are differences with the parents, see how they can work it in a way that the needs of the child becomes a priority. Because the child doesn't decide, he's just there. And if the parents, divorce, the child has nothing to say about it, he's forced to accept it. So parents shouldn't discuss differences in front of the child. In their mind, mother and father get along. So we don't want to show them the differences. Responsibility of parenthood is much greater than we think. Along with the emotion and attachment comes responsibility, naturally. Every soul has the ability to become Krishna conscious, so it doesn't depend on conditioning. Social skills, though, depend on our conditioning. Interesting point. So the Vedic concept tries to bring a balance between both. There are two different things. One may develop spiritually, but not socially. So because Krishna consciousness is a need of the soul, it doesn't depend on the material conditioning. Everyone has the right opportunity to become Krishna conscious. And it's not limited by the conditioning that we have. But when you want to develop social skills as a human being, then the nature has really much to do with it. Because we see in astrology that when a child is born, a child can take 3 different types of human nature. Can take the nature of the demigods, the nature of a human being, or the nature of asuras, more like a demoniac mentality. So that's why we can see in our children, although sometimes children come in family of devotees, depending on their past lives, some of them may have more like of a lower nature, which makes them difficult to learn these human values and qualities and social skills. So that's why as parents we have to see, and be tolerant and patient with them, seeing whatever nature that they have. Some of them will need much more attention and care to develop the proper human skills. Some of them will do it very naturally. But what is Krishna consciousness, then they can all grow nicely if we can give them this spiritual facility, definitely. So raising the child is a technique to help them function within the physical, emotional, and intellectual platforms, plus the skills that go along with it. And that's where, this is a lot of time investing. Because if they don't have that in their nature from their previous lives, then we have to put a lot of energy in trying to help them develop these qualities. But Krishna consciousness is another aspect because it deals directly with the soul. So it's not exactly the same platform. So yeah, I was speaking about the human conditioning. So the conditioning may not be favorable, but Krishna consciousness can still develop because dealing with the soul. So parent is in the category of guru, teacher. You figure out what is the method to get the student to learn it. So it's very important to see where a guru is to the child. You have relationship, you have influence. You don't, no influence. Primary is your relationship based on Krishna consciousness. This is what will make things work the best. If you have a relationship with the child based on trust and confidence, then there will be that attachment and trust to allow the parent to instruct the child in a way that the child can accept it and respect it. Because we can see nowadays in modern society how the children are growing is that there's no more respect of authority. Because the mother at first, we see how things are working, in families nowadays. More like in families of a modern background, coming from a Western background. That's the mother is not there, the mother and the father are working, not so much present for the child. So there's not so much a figure of authority for the child. The child is left alone, trying to figure out things. So if this is not there, then the child will not develop this mentality of respecting authority. And this is very foundational for them to respect teacher, for them to respect guru and senior, figures in their life. So we have to adjust our intervention until there's a favorable response. Sometimes after years of intervention, they will get it, depending on the nature that they have. So we have to be patient. So you walk the talk. Someone who says something of great value and tries to apply it will have weight to what he says, but it's more rare. So this is just to show how we can teach the children values, and if we teach them important principles, if they are very great and essential principles, they might appreciate it, even though as parents we might not have them fully imbibed in our consciousness or character. But still, the best is always to walk the talk. There's more efficiency in there. If you're aware of what you're doing and why you do it, then you can make your child aware. So you see, it really works with yourself first. When you understand why you do things, you cannot say to your child, oh, you have to do this because you have to do it. You have to make them understand why they have to do it. So teaching your child means you learn also. What you don't want to explain is what is not comfortable for you. So it's challenging because we're forced to deal with our own anarthas, our bad habits. And we have to see how we can deal with them properly so that we can instruct these things also for our children. When you maintain answering their questions, they will keep their inquisitiveness. If you don't know the answer, find out and let them know. Otherwise, they won't value acquiring knowledge anymore. Very important. When they start asking so many questions, very important you answer whatever they ask. Okay. Oh, something interesting. At the time of conception, the mentality of the parents will create a mentality for the child. This is why Gabordhan Samskar is very important in Vedic culture. If both have the same mentality, it will create a common one, but if different, will create a confusion in the child. Opposing simultaneous nature. Should be clear the nature of the child you are looking for at the time of conception. Because Ayurveda recommends that way before conception, the parents discuss which qualities, character they are looking for in the child. You attract the child according to your consciousness. Because everything is about consciousness. So it's very important to cultivate that, because Gabordhan Samskar is actually up to 1 year before conception. Just like Ayurveda, if you do Panchakarma before the conception, when all your doshas are balanced, that means that the child will have balanced doshas, meaning a very strong and a fit and balanced body. So we're almost finished. First 5 years, parents give the foundation to the child, so there should always be a parent present giving full time and attention to the child. This is the foundation. Child should never be left alone. How much you recharge the battery, that energy will be there. The child is so much attached to the parents. We cannot just leave them in a corner in a room closed, because the child won't understand. We have to constantly give them care and affection. But then when comes 5 years old, then they can learn more like, figure of authority and being more strict in their schedule. So the inner nature cultivated by parents for the first 5 years unfolds for the rest of their lives. Most important time to put the maximum effort. So like I was saying, you can't leave the kids crying alone. You don't take care of them, they won't take care of others. That's why you have to show them, even though they are crying and being naughty, you care for them so much that you're able to tolerate them and always be present for them. It will create that mentality that also they want to do that for others. At 16 years old, they are adults by mentality. They look at adults up to 30 as equals. Youth is 16 to 29. At 16, you treat them as a friend. Because at 16 years old, when become over teenage life, they want to be respected as adults. And if you give them that space, they will be able to grow more responsibly, and they will be able to grow more as an adult more quickly. So that's it. So any questions, comments, or reflections on what we discussed? You'd like to share? Yeah.
You're talking about opposing values.
Mm-hmm.
Like mother, father, teacher, they all have, nowadays there's different values that
Yes.
they all have. And
Yeah.
the child goes to each one,
Mm-hmm.
learns something different from each one, it's very confusing.
Yes.
I noticed in a lot of devotee families, not maybe many devotee families, that not both parents are devotees.
Mm-hmm.
And if both
Yes.
parents are devotees, maybe the rest of the family is not devotees.
Mm-hmm.
And if they go to school, there's anti-devotional culture there.
Mm-hmm.
And so like sometimes you have in a family two parents, one is a devotee, one is against it. Or, what they teach is completely against that. And so sometimes you see two parents, one parent doesn't come to the temple and the other one does. So it's always like there's two lives happening in families. And so when a child grows up with that, how do they manage that? Like it makes them feel like it's like, there's no consistency there. It doesn't give them strong faith in Krishna because of that, right? So how like now I see that happening everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
There's only very few families that have very strong devotional culture, right from the very beginning. And is that how does that affect the movement going forward? How does that affect the strength of the next generation of devotees?
Mhm. Well, personally, I'm convinced that we will really be able to push forward the movement when we start teaching the children at a young age, giving them these values because they're the future, of the movement. If we teach them at a young age with the proper movement mentality, values, and qualities, then they will be very solid human beings and Krishna conscious individuals to be able to take great responsibilities for the movement. So it's very important. And definitely what you said is definitely not ideal, makes it very confusing. But we have to try to find common grounds, like have to see how much, as parents, although like they might, one of them might not be a devotee, they have to see what is the need of the child and how they can act in a way that it's not so confusing for the child. So there has to be communication. And it's not always easy and to find common grounds, but we should try as much as possible to come to some compromises in a way that it's not so. We have to see how much it can be impactful for the child if we create too many disturbances like that. So if the parents really care for the needs of the child, they'll try to come to a common ground as much as they can. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, Prabhuji.
So, as I understand, we try to impart as much culture and Krishna consciousness in our family.
Mm-hmm.
But the young child, either school going or university, they get influenced very easily by the air which is moving around them.
Yes.
How do you reconcile this?
Well, like I was saying, ideal is to try, because to try to give a better facility as parents. Try to see how we can work together in creating more facility for the children to be trained in a system of education that is more in connection with our own values and the standards of life. That's the ideal, but if it's not there, then, like I was saying, it puts more weight on our shoulders to really make sure that they understand what's the difference. Letting them know that they will face these different mentalities with their children, and showing them, helping them to use their intelligence to see what is right and what is wrong. And that takes a lot of time communicating with them and making sure they understand these principles. But if they have this solid foundation in their family, definitely that will be a support for them, even though they face not the best association always. So that's why, at least in our families, we really have to make sure we have the best foundation.
I was told, Prabhu, that if we try to give prasadam to that particular child who is influenced in the university or in college, it can work maybe in the long run, but it will work, sanctified prasadam to them.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that can be one of the solutions on top of what we educate them.
Oh, you mean give prasadam to other kids at school?
No, to our own kids.
Oh, yes.
Who is influenced by university
Yes,
or
yes.
school.
Yeah, prasadam definitely has an impact on consciousness.
That can work.
We have to give them as much as we can, in these different aspects. Yeah. Thank you. Anything else?
There's one there.
Yes.
The question Prabhuji was asking first, I am the example because his father is not into bhakti,
Mm.
but it's not that he opposes to it. But when it comes to raising kid, he thinks that this modern age, what other people do, modern people do. So he is much influenced by that, and he thinks that he should be part of that flow.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think, because I am into bhakti for a long time now, so I think basically he should get this culture well, and so that he can, he'll feel that which will be good, and he can differentiate very easily.
Mm.
So how do I balance that? Because it's getting difficult as he is growing now.
Mm. Yeah, so we have to find the best of both worlds. So first, if you can communicate with your husband and see, describing the, maybe trying to see both sides of the coins, trying to explain how this, modern society has some good aspects, but there are some negative aspects in how it is, supporting our human growth, See how you can communicate, and if it's not working, then at least yourself as the mother, because there's such a strong connection between the mother and the child. You can definitely import whatever you can to the child, and making sure that from your side, you're giving them the values and qualities that you can appreciate. So definitely, as an individual, you can give that to your child, even though the father may not be so in tune with what you're trying to teach.
So basically, my idea was this, that even if I cannot give him completely at home, I was thinking that at a school, like we will be moving back to India in a year or two again. So there, we live in Pune.
Okay.
So the Krishna conscious school has been started there, the temple. So I was thinking to have to give him admission in that school, that would be helpful. But again, we have differences on that basis also. So what would be best, to send him into other schools, or it would be better to send him to Krishna conscious school?
Well, definitely, the ideal is always to be in a Krishna conscious school. But what's nice in India, there's many other good schools as well, you know, like which impart good values also. So trying to see, like trying to find a compromise, you know. That's what I was expressing about. Trying to find a compromise in which at least, you know, both of you are able to, you know, adjust and see according to the need of the child. That's why it's important we have to think about the need of the child, seeing like what is the need of the child and what, you know, we can find in between, you know, a compromise. And it's always trying to, because, you know, you're in a relationship with your husband, and the child has to see that also, that feeling of respect between each other. So if you try to adjust and try to find the best of both worlds, then the child will be able to see that also. Yeah. Anything else?
Mataji, did you start practicing Krishna consciousness before or after marriage?
Yeah, I was just introduced to Krishna consciousness just before getting married.
Just before?
Yeah.
So you didn't choose a partner based on that?
We tried for that, but then with the family, I was not that much into bhakti that time, and then still I was like attracted to these principles. But then family has in India, you know already that you have to all the caste and then everything. So we didn't get matched like that.
Okay.
What's nice with Krishna consciousness is such a high value,
And yes, and one thing is like I would really say that my husband, even though he's not a devotee, because he's grown in India and in a good culture, he has all the values, everything is there. But just it's only that raising a kid with a Krishna consciousness or not, that's the only difference. Otherwise, everything at family is really good.
Yeah, the human qualities are
Yeah, because he's not he is almost a non-smoker, he follows almost all the principles unconsciously.
So that is good. Thank you very much. So I think we have to move on now.
So let's put the